Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Early Childhood Chats, the podcast. Andy Rozak with you as always. And today, being joined by a great friend, Jen Rackliff of the National Indian Childcare Association, or NICCA as we like to call it. Jen, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having us. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today.
Well, I am super excited as well. This is an area that has a lot of, gosh, what do we say? Mystery, enigma. People are like, what is going on with Indian childcare? What are tribal programs? How is it different than quote unquote normal childcare and Head Start and all this kind of stuff? And I've had the chance to work with, gosh, I think it's 37 tribal nations at this point. So it's been a real blessing and an honor. And I've always really enjoyed my time working with everybody and had the privilege to present at your conference a few times now.
Mhm.
And looking forward to a big event you've got coming up in 2026. You guys will be moving to Hawaii for your next conference. So definitely got to
We will
submit
be.
my abstract to come speak with you guys in September. But by way of introduction, please tell the folks who you are, what you do, all that kind of great stuff.
All right. My name is Jennifer Rackliff. I'm the executive director for the National Indian Childcare Association. I've been with the organization for about 15 years. I am Cherokee and currently live where our Cherokee territory is. Our organization is really focused on advocacy and training and technical assistance. We've been around since 1993, so 32 years we're going on. And we support tribal childcare programs all across the country. So that's tribal governments operating childcare programs, childcare services, early learning services, and really supports for families that are, trying to go through education and training. We are primarily an advocacy organization, so we do a lot of work on the Hill at the federal level, but we also dabble in state level and tribal level policy and advocacy. And that's because sometimes states reach out to us and ask, how do we engage with tribes? The short answer to that is contact them. The longer answer is when you contact them, keep that relationship going. We have turnover even more than sort of the typical childcare professionals do. And so make sure that you're continuing to engage them and communicate with tribes. And I think at a state level, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to engage both the tribal leader and the administrators who are operating programs. The tribal leaders don't necessarily have all of the details and knowledge about what's happening sort of in their individual childcare program, much like the rest of our country. Our national leaders wouldn't know what each individual childcare program is doing or how it's operating. And then at the tribal level, it's about advocating for the childcare program specifically. So helping tribes understand the nuances between specifically childcare funding and Head Start funding. Childcare funding is extremely flexible, and Head Start funding is not necessarily so. And so helping them understand what what they can do, what flexibilities they have in childcare that they may not have in Head Start, and how to report that differently. We don't have the same level of reporting that other federal programs have. So it's about kind of helping tribal leaders and a lot of times their fiscal officers understand the flexibilities that childcare has. Then on the flip side of that, we also do trainings. And as Andy mentioned, our biannual conference in 2026 of September will be in Honolulu, Hawaii. And this conference, as most of our conferences do, but this conference is a little bit special because we will be getting to do really in-depth site visits, and we've partnered with the local Hawaiian CCDF program to really bring in traditional and cultural customs into the conference itself. We try to do this every single year that we have our conference. It doesn't always work out as well as we hope it does. This conference, we have spent a year before we even announced it, really making sure that these components are going to be really strong with this upcoming conference. We want you to know that, there are programs that are out there that we can see, and even easily. That's why we're in Honolulu, is because these programs are in and around the city to be able to visit and learn from both the challenges that they go through and the successes that they have, the strengths that they have, the stories that they're telling, but being able to showcase that so that people can take it back to their own communities and learn from it and share with their own communities. So we're really excited about that. Outside of those annual conferences, we usually do training institutes. We do individual TA when it's requested, but that's a little bit on the less side of things. Primarily, we focus on trainings and bringing people together to share their stories and share information with each other. And then, we're just really focused on creating a network of tribal childcare professionals and helping each other learn from each other and be able to build stronger systems in their own home community because they're learning from other tribes who are doing this same exact work.
Well, one thing we always say, if you've seen one early childhood program, you've seen one early
Seen
childhood
one.
program, right? And honestly, I
Exactly.
don't know that there's a program that's more complex than what some of your membership has to navigate. And you think about federal funding, state funding, tribal funding, parents paying for child care services at some
Hmm.
places. It's a lot to keep up with. And, this year has certainly been unique in terms of just all the challenges and changes that folks have made. I guess it wouldn't be uncommon to have a tribal program that literally has that many 4 or 5 diversified streams of funding coming in the door, right? Is that
Absolutely. I would say a good number of them do. One of the uniquenesses of tribal childcare is the flexibility that I sort of have already alluded to. And it gives us opportunity to create a system in our tribes of childcare and early learning that we want to create. And there is no other program that allows this. State childcare. It looks quite different than it does at the tribal level. Tribes can use our funding for direct services. They can have their own childcare center. They can have their own childcare homes. They do subsidy. They do essentially resource and referral. We don't call it that. We do kind of home, we can do home visiting programs and supporting families and parent engagement. We also have we can do construction and remodel with our money and our funding. And then tribes themselves bring in their own funding as well. So you'll have some tribes have Head Start and Early Head Start and the Early Head Start childcare partnerships. So even those three funding opportunities, some tribes have blended those together and created a single synonymous program. We have McV funding. So that's the maternal and child and infant home visiting program. I'm missing a letter, but it's the home visiting program. And tribes have their own set aside for that as well. And so childcare really can serve as that space for bringing all of these programs together and bringing all of these funding streams together. And I'm skipping a whole bunch of state ones. So there's state resource and referral. I know some tribes operate those. There's child and adult care food programs. So that's the CACFP program that often comes from the states. Um, and, then tribal funding, if tribes also contribute, a lot of tribes contribute to construction and helping create the facilities. Um, and so the CCDF money can be used to do all of these services, help implement all of these things, but also bring together all of these things. And that's one of the uniquenesses of our program that is really one of the biggest and greatest strengths that we have is that we can use it in such a way that we create a system and not these siloed areas of services that children and families have to go to access. So I'm about to get on my soapbox about how this is a really good example of what is already in law about what universal childcare could look like. We just got additional flexibility to be able to serve all of the kids in our communities. Now, caveat that we don't get the funding levels to serve all of our kids, so that we are still serving the highest need kids. But if funding were to be increased, we would be able to provide services to all of our kids in our communities. And it's just an incredible look at, without having to do away with the infrastructure that we have a system that gets us into that space of being able to really fully provide comprehensive childcare and early learning services for children and families. It's already in law. It's already being implemented by 264 tribes across the country. Um, and so we spend a lot of time, NICCA spends a lot of time in conversations sharing this with our national childcare advocates. So this is a good example of what it could look like under our current infrastructure. And, how do we grow from there? So it's a really, really cool space for tribes to have this opportunity and this flexibility to really showcase their sovereignty and their traditions and cultures and customs in creating that system. I will sort of backtrack that a little bit and say we're coming from a westernized view. And so it's still this Western program that tribes are largely, there are some tribes that are not, that have taken this on and are flipping it on its head, but we're still largely coming from a Western system and putting our traditions, cultures, and customs into that. And ideally, it's what are our traditions, cultures, and customs and beliefs about raising children and the connection of intergenerational connections. What does that look like? And then how do we put this funding into it? There are a few tribes that are doing that right now, but for the most part, we're still kind of in this other space. But it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of effort while you're still giving the services to sort of build from this. This is my foundation, and then I'll put the Western funding or ideologies into it as needed because it's required by funding regulations. Um, but it's happening, and I think that that's the thing that is really cool and it's really exciting is that it is happening and tribes are starting to do this and are starting to make advancements of creating their system and then using the funding to fund it. So it's a really cool space to be in tribal childcare right now.
Well, and the flexibility drives innovation, right? That's what really excites
Hmm.
me. If you give somebody some flexibility, let's see what they can do with it. And you kind of have these little incubators across the country to see what's working well, what's not working well. And of course, there's always going to be local variants and local challenges that you have to, account for. But I mean, I got to say, some of the best well-oiled machines, just off the top of my head, thinking about the ones I've seen firsthand that really pair that childcare with mental health, with healthcare in many
Hmm.
areas, and including medical and dental, substance abuse counseling right there along with mental health, food bank services. So I mean, some of the integration that I've seen from the tribal partners has been phenomenal, and it's probably one of our best kept secrets in the country. Um,
I
just
will
how well this
second
can
that for
work.
sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see some of the work that they're doing in the communities and really truly the difference that you make. Because just because you drop your kid off at 8 in the morning doesn't mean all these needs don't exist. Doesn't mean you're still, you
Hmm.
just don't cease to be part of the community. Um, and I've gotten involved with them in peacetime and sadly after emergencies and disasters too. And it's been really heartwarming to see kind of how the communities truly do come together to work, and if you're starting from a place where everybody's already talking to each other and the partners already know each other, gosh, that makes a disaster even better because you already have those connections
Hmm.
and all of that kind of stuff. One of the challenges, and I'm sure you hear this, quite often, is it's great that we have diverse funding. It's great that we have opportunity to access different pots of money. But the challenge is always each pot of money comes with different strings and comes with different reporting and comes with different paperwork. And I'm
Hmm.
sure you hear it a lot. Like some places I say, look, I'd love to take the money, but quite honestly, it's not worth the time because of all the restrictions you put out on all the paperwork. I'm never going to have time to actually do what the money's supposed to do
Hmm.
because I'm going to spend all my time just writing paper about this stuff. Have
Yep.
you heard that quite a bit? Yeah, I would imagine.
We
So,
do. And to be fair, I think that that's a big barrier for tribes pulling together and creating these systems is because it's the comprehension of like all of those pieces and who does it fall to because it's each individual program's responsibility for the program reporting, but then how does the financial reporting happen? Um, it really requires sort of that single entity that's focused on all of it. And how do you do that? How do you get there? It's hard because you basically needed a kind of a whole entire government entity that just
Right.
focuses on these streams of funding that can be integrated.
Yeah.
Um,
And not
and
only different requirements, but also usually different, funding dates and end date and stop date. And
exactly.
so like I got to
Yep.
spend this pot of money by this date, but this pot of money I mean, it's,
Exactly. It's a
you
constant
know,
juggling act by
yeah.
everybody involved. And it is hard. And, the one thing I will say about CCDF funding is that you can use it to find who that person is, to hire who that person is, to give them extra time to pull these things together and get these things in order. So CCDF has the flexibility to let you be able to do that as a tribal CCDF does as a tribe. But it's still finding like who's that person, where's the time for that person. Time is finite, even if you could pay them more. So, but tribes are really starting to pick up to understand that and figure out how they can do that. To the credit of the federal government as well, I think for the past several administrations, there have been efforts to increase flexibility for CCDF specifically. But I think in tribal programs in general, as it relates to social services, being able to create opportunities where these funding streams and these reporting requirements can be more easily facilitated. So I will put that in there as well because there is recognition of that the difficulty of that. So tribes are making advancements in it, but I think we're continuing to incur flexibilities to make sure that that happens at the federal level of these funding streams. So
Yeah.
it's really an exciting time to be creating solutions.
Well, and it's a different skill set, right? I mean, the skill set you need to manage grants and be fiscally responsibility is a little bit
Exactly.
different than like, being in a room with a
Being in the
two-year-old and,
classroom. Yep.
so I mean, even just the hiring, whole scheme is a little bit different. Um, kind of thinking about that. So we think about just general challenges across the early childhood, spectrum here, right? So staffing concerns and
Mhm.
obviously, low enrollment in some cases, challenging behaviors, certainly after COVID. What are you guys seeing? Are you seeing the same kind of challenges with workplace and staffing and all that as everybody else? Or are your members a little bit more insulated and maybe they have a little bit more stable of a workforce than some of our other programs out there?
No, we have the exact same challenges. I think a lot of our challenges come from not even just being rural, but even remote.
Mm.
And who do we get? Who can we, we're paying less than Taco Bell and McDonald's. And how do we recruit people into these remote communities where, their services and access to things is maybe not quite as much as it might be in some other places. And their pay is not as great as it could be at Taco Bell. And there's less stress, I'm assuming. I've never worked at Taco Bell, but it's potentially less stress than taking care of kids in a classroom. And we don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
But tribes are seeing that. And I would even go as far to say childcare professionals, even at the administrator and manager and director level, for tribes has really had a huge upheaval over the past several years. I think we're starting to see it flatten out a little bit now, but in 23 and 24, we saw a 70% turnover of CCDF
Wow.
administrators. So those are the professionals who are operating the federal program itself, which is, institutional knowledge from tribes, institutional knowledge about a federal grant program, institutional knowledge about child development, and 70% turnover in 2 years. And
Wow.
it's incredibly challenging to be able to create a network where people can learn from each other because in a lot of professions when someone at that that high level of a program implementation is leaving, they say, I'll stick around for another month or two or be on call for a month or two to support the person coming in behind me. In these situations, it's often not like that. It's I'm gone for whatever reason. Sometimes it's a personal decision, sometimes it's a tribal decision, and anything and everywhere in between and beyond. But it's they're leaving, and then 4 months later, that position gets hired. And so it's not even just a loss of that institutional knowledge, it's literally a drain of institutional knowledge that has to then come in. Now, to the credit of the people that have come in, we're starting to build relationships with these new people, and they're really incredible. They're go-getters. They came in. I have this one specific woman in mind, and she came in and she's read everything from her tribe. She's now done a tribal plan. So she's even now she's like seasoned. And she's, I think, 16 or 18 months in, but she's seasoned now.
Nice.
She doesn't get newbie status anymore. Once you read a plan, you get no newbie status. But she's really just dove in and really learned all of the ins and outs that she can. She voraciously takes in all of the information, and we're seeing that, and that's really uplifting to see individuals who are coming in, some with no experience operating childcare services or programs, some with no experience working with tribes, even if they may be tribal, they might not have experience working in the tribal government, some with no experience working, implementing a federal grant, and sometimes none of those things. And so to have people who are really willing to sort of step up to this challenge and understand and get to know the nuances of tribal childcare and of childcare in general, but the nuances of tribal childcare, even especially, is really heartening. And it's really incredible to see the ideas that are coming out of people, and the questions that are being asked, because when you're new operating a federal program, you're like, oh, can I do that? And our little funny shtick that we always do is yes, you can. Like, tribes can literally do anything that they want with their federal funding, with their tribal CCDF funding, as long as it relates to childcare and childcare services. So, there are obvious limits, but they're coming in with these really incredible notions and thoughts about, well, maybe it's better if we combine these things. And I'm like, yes, you should combine those things. That is a great idea. How do we bring in, tribal nutrition efforts, and what is our tribe doing in these spaces? And how do we support our providers? The supporting providers is something that a really amazing thing came out of COVID for that. And we did a ton of surveys and a ton of like information gathering on how COVID was affecting tribal childcare. It wasn't affecting tribal childcare to the degree it was affecting a lot of other places, because we could stay open for emergency responders. We could stay open for just because we had that level of funding and staffing and capability to make those decisions. The other thing that we could do was give grants to providers out in the field. We
Mm,
had lots of providers write us and say, thank goodness for the tribal CCDF programs in my area, because I would have had to have closed because I couldn't have gotten grant funding from anywhere else. And so, a big win out of COVID for us is that tribal childcare, tribal governments with their CCDF dollars were keeping the system of childcare open. They were giving grants to home-based providers to keep the field and the childcare structure as a country open. And there was not a lot of spaces and places that could say that. I know states gave grants too, but a state grant of a couple of $1,000s is very different from a $10,000 grant from a
right.
tribe, and tribes were able to do that. And tribes did it in mass numbers. And then I think the sort of lesson coming out of that is that they're continuing to do it. Not quite to the level, because we don't have that funding anymore, and we don't have that degree, that depth of funding. But they are continuing to do it. They have recognized the importance um, of giving to the community that is serving them. And these are home providers who likely have Native children, but they don't have to have Native children,
Right.
because lots of tribes aren't sort of holding slots in these home-based provider spaces. It's that families are opting to go to them. So they may have or have not, and they're still getting federal funding, or sorry, tribal funding. to implement their services and programs. And the flexibility that tribes have is that they can do, they can kind of help on a needs-based in a needs-based area. So, if somebody needs help, if a home-based provider needs help with their playground or their outdoor infrastructure, how can we do that? How can we help them build a fence and fix their fence? And how can we help them fix their dishwasher? These are things that we can do because we have that flexibility. Um, and it just creates a stronger community of services for children and families, and it truly builds up the community that they're in, because we're serving everybody in the community.
And I think that's a great point. That was probably one of the biggest, I guess, misnomers I had. I remember the first tribe that we worked with. I went out to a bunch of different sites in that community, and I walked in, and I just thought it was going to be like these are all tribal kids. I had no idea. No, that's not necessarily the case. Now, some places there are 100%, but like you're referencing, in many communities, you may have a child that's a tribal member of this particular nation, and then another child who's of a different nation, and then a community
Hmm.
kid who's not Native American at all. I mean, it was just shocking to me because I kind of thought like you would go in and there'd be like, these are all, Cherokee, these are all whatever. Um, but that wasn't the case. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that thought that, but it was kind of shocking to
And
me,
you're And you're bringing up a really good point, because that's another space I didn't actually say about funding. Tribal CCDF can have a center and take state subsidy children, as long as they follow the laws of the state. And so that's even another stream of funding that's available to them. And some tribes do, some tribes don't. And there are 264 tribal CCDF grantees, and
wow.
there are 574 tribes. And many of those tribes also have childcare services that may not be CCDF. Um, the nuance of that is that a lot of tribal CCDF programs operate through consortia, so it's groups of tribes. So the tribal CCDF reaches about 500 tribes. But that is all to say, a couple of things. Some tribes have opted to serve just their native kids. Some tribes only have the capacity to provide childcare subsidy. And so, families are deciding where they're going out in the community, and tribes are providing subsidy for that. Lots of tribes are starting to build their own facilities and infrastructure around childcare, partially through CCDF, partially through other funding. There's lots of HUD funding, housing and urban development funding, that is available to do childcare centers as well. Um, and so there is just this acknowledgement that when we build for our community, we build a better community.
Yeah.
And so, you can walk into a center. My daughter's center was run by a tribe near me, and they had they had people from everywhere. The community that she lives in was extremely diverse, and they had so it was when pre-COVID, so it was when she was a 2 year old, or two, yeah, 2 year old. And she had, I don't remember, 12, 10, 8 to 12 kids in her class, but it was pretty broken up. There was a couple of Spanish speaking kids, there was a couple of Chinese speaking kids, and there was a couple of Indian language, not Native American, Indian language speaking kids. And I don't remember what language they spoke,
Wow.
but, and then a couple of English speaking kids. And so just the incredible diversity of the program, and the opportunity of programs to be able to have all of that diversity coming in, but also being able to share their own language and culture and customs with those children. Like, can you imagine a kid who's walking out of their 3 year old, 2 or 3 year old classroom, and they speak Spanish at home and they speak English in the classroom, but they're also learning, I'll say Cherokee because I'm Cherokee, but this what program wasn't a Cherokee program, but they're also learning Cherokee in their early education classroom, and they go home and they're speaking that to their parents, or like teaching them how to say chair or OCO, which is hello. Like, can you just imagine the opportunity that we as a culture, but also tribes, have in sharing that culture outwardly, in addition to sharing it with our own? It just creates like a stronger community locally, but also broadly. So it's just a really, it becomes a beautiful space. It is a beautiful space, but it becomes a beautiful space um, when we acknowledge the impact, and tribes are, but when we acknowledge the impact that, that we as a community service, even if it's a tribal community service, have on the broader community around us. I always share when people ask me questions about this. Um, we don't live in a world where everything I do is Cherokee and functioning in a Cherokee community. I live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and probably a lot of my neighbors are maybe Cherokee, but I don't know. I don't look Cherokee. And so like how, what is the impact that we're having, and the opportunities that we have when we can share who we are and let other people be a part of who we are, in our hearts and in our minds, to build that understanding and empathy.
Well, the connection is just the history and the connection and the culture. I mean, I love walking in because the artwork always blows me away, right? You see these
Hmm.
beautiful, little drawings that the kiddos are doing, and and I always learn new words too, by the way, which is crazy. One
OCO,
thing,
you can take that one back
yeah,
now.
I didn't know that one, so I'm marking that one down. A lot of questions come up too about like tribal leadership, tribal elders, councils. Can you help demystify some of this stuff for us? What are these things? Do they get involved in childcare? Do they make decisions? Like I know each one's probably a little bit different depending on the structure, but some are active, maybe some aren't so active. What does all that kind of look like as another layer on top of this?
Yeah, so at a tribal government, as I said before, there's 574 tribes. So, that's dated as of probably my last looking, which is maybe a year or so ago. So there might be a couple of more at this point, but um, the one thing I always start with is the same as childcare. You've seen one program, you've seen one tribe, you've seen one tribe. But I can say, there's oftentimes, or I guess sometimes I should say, there's sometimes a tribal leader, and that's sort of the entity. There's sometimes a tribal council. Sometimes there's both. Sometimes the tribe is by a tribal council itself. There's different terminologies that tribes use. There are presidents, there are tribal leaders, there are, and now I'm blanking on governors. The Pueblos often use governors as their leadership nomenclature. And, you know, there's different amounts of engagement. I would say probably there is a specific person in either the tribal leaders sort of body administration, I would say. So we'll use that federal term. I don't, some tribes probably use that, but I don't know many that do. But in their administration that are focused on these areas and these specific topic spaces. But that's not to say that there are not tribal leaders who are also personally invested. And, we had an event a couple of months ago where we were bringing in tribal CCDF administrators. And we also invited tribal leaders to come to DC to engage with state advocacy partners and state administrator, CCDF administrator partners, to build those relationships. And we actually had a few tribal leaders who took time out of their schedules to come and do this networking and build their knowledge around what CCDF looks like. And then we sent them to the Hill, and we got them congressional visits, and they went and saw their congressional leaders and congressional leaders that are important for childcare, particularly Indian childcare. And they were able to share their stories. And that's sort of what's the most important is how do we get an individual story out? And it's not just the administrators that can tell the story. We need parents, we need providers themselves, we need teachers in the classroom, we need tribal leaders, because likely their kids or their grandkids or their great grandkids are either going through the system right now or have gone through it, whether it's Head Start, childcare, home visiting, ICWA, resources and supports. So there's, at a government level, which is kind of why we also support tribal CCDF programs who need that advocacy at the tribal government level, because sometimes there are so many nuances of tribal CCDF that it's hard to wrap your head around. And so us supporting tribes in gaining that knowledge and tribal leadership gaining that knowledge, but also supporting them when they're on the Hill. Like we send our advocacy sheets to the National Congress of American Indians, the National Indian Education Association, the National Indian Head Start Directors Association. We send it all whenever anyone is going on the Hill. We say, here is our little our advocacy sheets. Take this, and here is, you know, 3 bullet points that we want you to get across as a tribal leader, as a parent, as a grandparent, as you know, whatever your role in this is in your community is. Here's the things that we need you to share. We want you to share along with your story. One of the things that we're really considering starting, well, there's kind of two other focuses I want to talk about a little bit. But one of them is how do we kind of increase the story gathering?
Sure.
So we have started a project on tribal stories. It's got a longer name, and now I'm blanking on it. I should have had it up so I could give it to you, but it's really about collecting stories from people in the field. We are targeting tribal CCDF administrators, but we are also going to spaces where there's a lot more wider audiences. We will be at the NCAI conference in November. We're going to go to the Alaska Federation of Natives conference in October, where we are going to use these opportunities to collect voices and tribal stories of people using tribal childcare programs. And we're doing this in person, we're doing it by Zoom, but it's just a space for us to start gathering these stories that can be shared to the masses, to the general public, to each other, to other tribal CCDF programs, but also to our congressional officers. And the other space that we're really doing um, is trying to target tribal leaders themselves. They have I mean, a tribal government is like, consider the federal government and the bureaucracy of our federal government now at this time. But consider all of that, and you have to think tribes have the exact same responsibilities as a sovereign nation that our federal government does. And so our tribal leaders have all of these things they have to manage for their people. And so how can we give them tools? How can we increase their knowledge in ways that are accessible for tribal leaders? So we're really trying to think about what that looks like. We do plan on having a tribal leader push for our conference in Hawaii next year.
Oh, nice.
We are kind of mapping out what that looks like. We'll definitely have some networking events and some opportunities for them to share what their tribes are doing with each other, with our General Assembly. We're also really thinking about how do we increase tribal leaders' voice on the Hill. And so that's something that we're strategizing what that looks like and figuring out what those solutions could be. And that's not to say that we will sort of back away from tribal CCDF administrators or providers or teachers in the classroom, parents. We are actively seeking parent voices. But also, how can we also engage the leadership of tribes so that hopefully that sort of institutional knowledge continues in the tribe, and we find advocates who are going to be our cheerleaders, who are going to be our, you know, our full-time go-to people who will champion our voice. So we're in the process of strategizing what that looks like as an organization. We have a couple of other projects around child nutrition that we will be building some of that out as well. So we're just, as an organization, we're in this really big period of growth. And hopefully we're on a path to creating that growth in sort of that tribal leadership space as well.
So I know you're very active in the policy arena, and I know there's been some moving pieces, you know, up on the Hill right now. Hopefully they continue to move. We'll see how things progress here over the next several months. But it seems to me that, you know, issues that keep coming up, you know, sovereignty, right? Sovereignty is a big deal. Tribal consultation, data sovereignty. Like, what do we do with this data? We're putting data in. Do we ever get it back out? How can we access data? And What are some of the other big legislative asks? If you had a magic wand and could say, I want to make the perfect bill, what other tweaks are you guys looking at, or what other asks do you have of our friends up in Congress to help you all out?
Do we have another 3 hours or so? No, I will say that there's a couple of short things that I can share. We have sort of, I'm going to say, like, short-term pushes that we go for. And one of them is a 5.5% increase in tribal CCDF set aside. And that's sort of just like under the infrastructure we have right now. Let's start there. But I'm going to say, if I had a wand and it would be what we need it to be, it would be to truly understand what the cost of care is for tribal children and then fund that for every Native child.
Yeah.
One of the things that I haven't talked about, and I'll just give this a tiny little bit of time, but um, we don't, I'm going to get to your bigger data thing, but we can't access data about tribal CCDF. So the data that we have to extrapolate from often comes from Head Start and the American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian Head Start program.
Mm,
And we know that their sort of data point is about 50% of Native kids are served by tribal Head Starts, 50% are served by non-Native Head Starts. I venture to say that that is a lot less for childcare, but at the very least, 50-50. So of our CCDF dollars, only 50% of those are serving our Native kids. What's happening to the other 50% of our Native kids, 50 plus percent? We don't have an answer to that, but no Native organization is serving them, which means, it's not that they're bad. They're not, they're in, let's say they're in, I'm trying to think of a city that, Chicago, maybe. They're in Chicago and there's not a tribe servicing there. So the native kid is just going to a childcare in Chicago.
yeah,
Nothing wrong with that, but they're not getting sort of their own identity
yeah.
supports, right? Their own traditions, their own cultures, their own ideologies, their own beliefs. So my magic wand in the funding stream is getting that child served. I don't know what that looks like, but making sure that that child has access to their tribes and tribal resources.
Yeah,
You,
that was more of a challenge than I ever anticipated, and just stupid me, so naive, right? But to access a lot of these, and even different places you go, different license plates, and all of this, a lot of the tribes, you have to obviously show that tie back, right? To that my grandparents, were a member of this tribe or whatever, and as you can imagine, with all the historical nonsense that went on, people weren't exactly coming out of the woodwork saying, "I want to register as a Native American. I want to register as an Indian. I want to register with this tribe or whatever have you," because of fear of repercussion and the horrible stuff that, they had just all went through. And I mean, I've had these conversations where now we're, two, three, some cases, four generations removed. And it's been very challenging for some families to access the benefits which they should get because, sometime 50, 70, 100 years ago, someone didn't go sign a book somewhere at a government office. I mean, it's honestly, it's nothing I ever would have thought about, but to see the impact of this, it's just devastating. And I know there's some flexibility here and there, but it's got to be one of the most frustrating things I mean, just as you're talking, what is the kid in Chicago doing? But how many of those kids are out there that we don't even know about? And maybe they don't even know about
yeah.
their heritage because of the system that was so archaic back then.
Exactly.
I
And
don't know.
each tribe's different. So we have
Yeah.
that, people ask that all the time. And I'm like, you're going to have to do your genealogy. You're going to have to figure out what tribe you think that you're from. So we typically don't get into it more than that, except, reach out to the tribes that are local to you and try to see what you can, what kind of supports you can get from
Well,
them.
and some of the tribes
Um,
are thriving, and then we've seen sadly some tribes have almost completely disappeared, and just again, it's just kind of a sad commentary, and I know you're representing kind of all the tribes, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush, but it's just like any other place you go geographically. Like some cities have a lot of great infrastructure and have a lot of money and have a lot of opportunity and things to do, and then some places you go are very remote and isolated, and the opportunity there is much less than other places. And my hat's off to you because it's hard to kind of again come in and advocate with one voice because you have a lot of different competing, programs and capabilities that are out there. So I'm
Hmm.
glad that they all can come to you and you guys can serve as that clearinghouse of kind of leading practices and connecting groups with others and trying to find some real innovative solutions because I can imagine it must be challenging at times.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that I will share, kind of following this is data and understanding what tribes are doing, what childcare looks like in our communities. The data is there, it's collected by the federal government, but we don't have access to it.
Hmm.
We can't get. I'm my background is in research and data, and
Yeah.
so when I got on board, I was like, we're going to get this data, and it's been 15 years, and I've never had access to it.
Wow. Is that like census level or what's the problem?
So I can speculate, but I have not really
I
been
mean,
told.
I'm a lawyer. Can I just FOIA it somehow? Can we get it? Like, what's going on here?
If you really are a lawyer, let's talk offline.
I really am.
So okay, well, maybe we should. Well, so there are 264 programs, and we've been told there are too many programs to collect this information. And I'm like, but they send it to you, and they're like, it's too many to resend out to you. And I'm like, well, I'm just asking you to send it to me. I'm not asking you to do anything with it.
Right. We'll get an intern. I
Now
can sort through it. Chat GPT can
Yeah,
sort
and
through it.
now it's digitized, so everybody submits it digitally, and I'm like, so now what is the reason? And now the reason is like, well, it's tribal data, and I'm like, well, we're a native organization. We are operated, I didn't mention this before, but our board of directors are all tribal CCDF team members of their own tribes. Their tribe supports them. Their tribe acknowledges that they are on our board. That's a requirement for being on our board of directors. And our staff is all native, by happenstance, but we are all native. And so I'm just sort of like, we're a native organization, we're a native advocacy organization. Like this is our whole thing. And it's still this tribal data conversation, but I'm like, Head Start data is out there. Like, how come that's not tribal data? So I don't have
Yeah,
an
and
answer, but
including
the
Head
data
Start
is there.
migrant program data, which
Yep.
you, huh?
Yeah, exactly. The data is there, but we just can't get access to it. And, I think I've talked with several advocates, sort of some legal advisors, and talking about what possible opportunities we could take. And I'm just trying to avoid them because there's no reason why we can't get the data. The most recent request was, we can't give you these. It's 164 pages, I think, of a plan that a tribe has to write. Um, and they're like, so if you want to just give us sections, and I'm like, well, okay, I'll start with section one. And when you give me section one, I'm going to come back and ask you for section two. So just so that you're fully aware, I'm going to be asking you for all of these. And
Yeah,
and
like it's
it's
hard isn't an excuse, right? Like, okay.
right. And I'm like, you're the most powerful government in the world. I don't understand how hard 264 data points are.
Right.
Um, so, well,
Huh.
times 164, but that's not even that big, right? Like,
No, not if it's all
um,
digitized. All right, we'll have to
so
work on that. We'll work on that
so
offline.
we have a huge issue with data.
Yeah.
We can't tell our story without that data. And to be fair, there's a ton of other nuances that I won't get into here for time reasons, but at least it would give us about 60% of an understanding of what tribal childcare is doing. But right now, we have an anecdotal understanding, which is great because we're still able to tell stories and get some big general pictures. But going from what we can collect by surveys to, what the feds collect every year
Yeah.
is, 60 plus percent. The other 30% lies in a different federal program. So, well, that's a whole nother can of worms, but with
Well, I'm a lawyer and
increased
I live in
flexibility.
DC,
So,
so if I got to go knock on doors, man,
um,
I'm happy to do so. Like, we got to get this data.
yeah,
It's
so
public data, I would think. I don't know.
we have been working with the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs to try to figure out how to make that happen. We just submitted comments to a bill Murkowski's about to introduce. I don't know when, I don't know what the path is, but on, part of it was around data, and there's some opportunities that they are trying to do to compile federal data. And my comments back were, that is also needed, but also, and we need access to the data that's there right now. We would be able to learn the number of children served, the number of the types of programs that tribes have, the partnerships that tribes are engaging. Those are my three sort of big data points. I'm like, get me those numbers, and I like
Right.
it. I just still can't get it. We have a whole research data, kind of like our advocacy agenda. We have a research agenda where they all know the questions I want to ask. And so every time someone asks me, what the sort of two things that I give people is one, we need more funding, both as childcare in general, but our funding is tied to what the nation gets. So we get a set aside, which means any increase that we get, it decreases everybody else's pool. So, there needs to be a system where we're not against each other.
Right. Right.
So that's sort of my funding stream request. And then is the next one is the data side. We have to be able to access the data to tell our stories. There's data there, and it's there every 3 years. The tribe submits a plan, and every year they submit an annual report. So it's there. It's just the access that's not.
Hmm.
And that's the big, I've been screaming it from the mountaintops for 15 years, and we
Wow.
just have not been able to get access to it.
We're going to try to fix it. If you're a student, want to help out, drop us a note. That'd be a fun little exercise in government transparency, right? We
Yes,
were
I will
successful. I
welcome that.
wasn't, like we've been successful in getting data from Head Start and some of the other stuff, which, by the way, was the same argument as far as
Hmm.
there's too much data or it's too difficult or whatever,
Well,
but that's not really an
and I
excuse, right?
understand,
So,
right, it's not. And I understand the excuse of the tribal sovereignty of data. And I totally understand that. But there is one, it's a federal program. And two, if it is a data sovereignty issue, I am okay with that. Send me the aggregate. I don't
yeah,
need to
de-identify
know
it,
that.
right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't even need to know that, the Osage Nation served 700 kids. I don't, to me,
right.
I will be totally sufficient with, 400,000 kids were served.
Right.
Like that's what I'm looking for. To me, that's sort of a little bit of a wild scenario because, you know, ideally, I would love to have the individual tribal data, and I can't ask tribes for that, but and we do. But as I said, there's a 70% turnover of tribal CCDF
Right.
programs, so we lose that person and we lose that connection, and so
Yeah.
now it's a new person. Who are you? Why are you asking me for my information? So it's a constant, we're a small organization and it's a constant sort of like relearning of who we are to our own people. And so, it's a possibility. And if our organization also had unlimited dollars, we would probably be able to get that from the tribes. But it's to me, it's just wild that we can't access these stories that are needed to be told.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to do something to fix it. I'm gonna work on it. We'll see. But yeah, it is
I
wild. It
like
doesn't make
this.
any sense. It's my promise to you. We'll work on it for sure. I don't
Oh,
mind bugging
great.
people. So
Well, then
reflect a
I'm,
little bit. Put on your hat. You've been in this space
Mhm.
15 years. You kind of grew up in this space too, because I know your mom was very influential and very active. What do we see kind of that's changed over the last 15 years? What does the future look like? What keeps you up at night? What's kind of the state of where things are at, where we've come from, where we're going? What's exciting to you? What's bothersome to you?
I'm gonna tell a little bit of my story and tap my mom in this because my mom ran a tribal childcare program for 30 years. And she doesn't run that program anymore. But that program, when she was running it, had um, every funding stream that you could possibly imagine in her program. And she was running all the services, like everything you could imagine. And she had, at some points, she had 6 centers, 2 to 3 family childcare homes. She was doing resource and referral. She was doing home visiting and meeting with parents and guardians in their homes, literally every service. And every child in those classrooms and in those homes just came to childcare. They didn't have any separation of services. They didn't get one meal was different than another. They didn't get a different playground. They didn't get a different classroom, everything. And she ran Head Start, childcare, all of the things. It was so incredibly blended that the only people who knew what anybody was participating in, the families didn't even know. Some just got supports and some didn't get supports. The only people who knew it were people at the administrative level of the program and the financial people. The teachers in the classroom didn't know. So it just like seeing that trajectory. And my mom, when she started, I mean, now it's been 35 years, I think. So she hasn't been doing tribal childcare for a bit, but 30 years ago, 35 years ago, she started with a small program, like a very small program, and created this over 30 years of, spanning several counties, and just saw the opportunity that is there and being able to pull all of these things together. So I tell that long-winded sort of intro into saying, my understanding of the path from which we've come has come largely from her. And my vision for what is to come also sort of rides on her coattails of what is out there that we could still do. She is a tremendous visionary, and every time she's ran programs, and I have not run a tribal program. I have not run a childcare program. So I'm coming at it from more of a policy space. And so to have this, my mom in my back pocket to say, what does it mean when this happens? Would this work? And to be able to sort of envision, so she got up to this point, what would be her next point if she was still doing it? What can we still do? What can tribes
Wow.
still do?
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
how
so
how
I
easy would
like,
it be to do what she did 30 some years ago today? Like, could you even do that today in the environment we're in? I mean, I don't know.
yeah.
What a
Well,
visionary
so I,
though.
I lean on I lean on my mom as that visionary, and I also have a board of directors who are equally visionary. They are all over the country, and they're all doing amazing, amazing things in their programs. And every time I talk to them, I've learned something new about what they're doing. The Rosebud Sioux is one of the tribes that is um, putting this Western view on its head. And they have created, what are our customs, traditions, values, and let's build our system and our early childhood services around that. And then we'll pull in the requirements. They are doing that. And simultaneously running programs. They're also constructing a new facility that is built in these traditions and cultures. The Chickasaw Nation has a sick childcare program. So they have literally a
Wow.
dedicated space for children who are unwell to come into, and their families and parents and guardians can still go to work and they still get care and care for being sick.
Phenomenal.
Um,
What a blessing that
the
is. My goodness.
Right? And I don't know of many other or any other programs doing that. The Bear River Rancheria in California is um, I'm gonna miss what the nuances of the bringing of their language and culture into their program, because we just did a tribal story around it and I read it and it was such um, a beautiful showcase of how to bring in their language and culture into their program without simply just saying, putting a tag on a chair that says this is a chair, right? Or hello when you walk in the door, OCO.
Right.
It was a more of an integration of it. And they're not an immersion program. They don't I don't know if they even have native speakers in their program, but they have found ways. I remember what it was. They have found ways to bring the language into interactively into their program. It was through recordings. So they have a little thing with a button that kids can go and push. And it's not just saying OCO to them, it might also be telling them a story about the
Wow.
word hello. It was like, and I just learned about this person, this woman's been on our board for several years, and I just learned about it a couple of weeks ago. And so there's always, everyone on our board is always doing new and really cool things that are so exciting. And I get so excited to share with others. Um, so, I lean on them and I lean on their vision and I lean on their voice to really help us uh, put forth what is to come. And I'm a visionary myself, so I also am like, why can't we talk about having complete funding that is pie in the sky? Every Native child gets served. Let's start from there, and then we'll figure out like what would we do? What does it look like? What would you do with all of that? I don't let people come in and talk to me and say, but that's not how it is. That's not how it's gonna be. And I'm like, you don't know that. You do not know that. It's not how it is today, but tomorrow is a new day.
That's it. Don't
Um,
you hate the old, we've always done it that way?
hmm
So,
I am a big like, don't come
yeah.
to me with that.
So when my baby was 4 months old, she used to poop her pants. Now she's almost five. Guess what? We ain't doing it that way
Yes.
anymore, right?
I'm reading a book on how to teach children like to engage. I homeschool, so I'm reading a book on how to engage children in writing, and I'm I was the straight A student. I'm like the dorky, nerdy person. I'm like, when a paragraph structure, you keep it the same. And this book is like, your kids already learned how to talk, and you didn't go through like and say when they were learning how to talk, well, that's a noun, and a noun is followed by a verb. You just let them talk. When they said tree, you understood they meant that tree right there, and like they were talking about the tree blowing in the wind. And they're like, but we don't do that with writing. We suddenly expect that they're going to be doing this like, that noun, verb, adjective, all the things. And it says, this woman said, the book said, we take away all of their ingenuity and their creativity and we create robots. And then as an adult, when they want to go into creative writing, they have to strip all of that. And
That's a good
so,
point. Yeah.
so the book was like, so just start with this creative part. Let them be creative. When you say, write me this, let them write whatever they want to write. And then over time, you can say, that this is a noun and the prose that you wrote, because there's a word for it, right? It's prose when it doesn't have noun, verb, all of the things in the structure. It's prose and it's poetry. And so you say, this poetry is beautiful and you got your point across. Now I want to tell you if I were to write this in a formalized structure, this is what it would look like. And so anyways, like you're exactly right. It's like forcing people a little bit sometimes to really get out of this scarcity mindset, which childcare has, tribes and tribal people have, marginalized populations in general have. Um, how do we get out of that? And so, I'm very much like we're coming in with pie in the sky. That's the baseline. That is the baseline. If you've got bigger than pie in the sky, that's what I want you to go for.
I love it. I mean, hey, why not ask for the moon? What are you going to do, right?
Well, and I will say my final plug for that is that Tribal CCDF is the place for pie in the sky, because we can do it. And so, I'm actively seeking tribes who want to do this big vision and who want to create a system with their CCDF dollars, and they're doing it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but I want more. I want more on
Push
board.
the envelope. I love it. So NICCA.us is the website.
Hmm.
Tell
Yep.
us about the September conference. I see the call for speakers is up. What are people going to
Yep.
talk about, learn about? Let's get people to come to Hawaii in September 2026. Huh? What do you think?
Yep. So our speaker proposals are up. Registration is open, actually through the end of September. Registration is super early bird, but that ends on September 30th. Members get a discount. So if you're not a member of the organization, you should be. You do not have to be a tribal CCDF organization to become a member. We have individuals, we have organizations and associates. Um, we have sponsorship opportunities and exhibit booths. So those are also all possibilities for joining us. Now, if you're going to come as an attendee, I will share. We're putting together our agenda now. So if you want to be a part of sharing what you want on the agenda, we're open to hearing that. But largely, you can expect to have a couple of different things happening. So we'll talk about CCDF, tribal CCDF administration. We'll talk about policy and where we're at that point. I know we will be right before another election, so we'll be
Mm.
in the midterm elections coming up a month or so, or 2 months after our event. So that will probably be a big, heavy part of what we're talking about and how to get your voice out there to your community and to fellow voters. And then we also will be having probably a track on self-care and wellness, where we want to encourage teachers and administrators and childcare professionals to care for themselves. There's not often that space to do that. When you leave your office, you often take your office home and your work home with you, but you also have things happening at home. So we want to use this space to give you some time to sit, to time to reflect, some time to, kind of reconnect with yourself and your mind and your body. One of the things that I've been pushing for a couple of years is to have a boardroom. And I don't mean a BOARD room, I mean a BORED room, where you can sit in that room and do nothing. So there will be no allowance of phones and computers and things that you're coming in, but it's literally to sit there and be bored. Because we tell children like a lot of learning and ideas and creativity comes from being bored. We don't ever give ourselves that time as adults, ever in any field. And it's especially important in childcare when we have young minds that we're pushing to do this and we don't do it ourselves. Um, and then we will have opportunities for people in the classroom, people, home providers to, talk about curriculum and ideas for teaching strategies and caring for children, specifically addressing health needs, addressing challenging behaviors. So the whole gamut for those of you that are in the classroom as well.
Well, it's fantastic. I hope everybody comes. I'm gonna be there. I was with you guys last time, so I can't wait to come back and see everybody.
And
It's a
we,
phenomenal
I'll,
conference. You guys put on a
I'll
great
add,
conference.
Andy, that we are scheduling it. We don't normally do it so far out in advance. We announced it about 6 months ago or several months ago. And we want to invite you to bring your family as well. We announced it this early so that you could start making plans to come and bring your family. My daughter travels with me. You'll see her working that event. And we welcome you to bring your families. If you have infants, come in, join us, bring your infant. People love to see the faces of the kids that they know they're supporting in this work, and it's helpful to have that. But also, your kids don't have to come to the classroom. There's pools and there's a beach right nearby. So it's a super friendly, family friendly resort. So we're hoping that that also entices you to make a family vacation out of it if you want.
I mean, I can't say enough great things. It's a little bit of a plane ride from the East Coast, but it's well worth every
Mhm.
minute on the plane. And maybe you can even go to dinner at Duke's on the beach and have a wonderful pina colada or something there as well. And some
Yeah.
spam too, by the way. Oh my goodness.
I forgot to do that when I was there last time when we were doing our site visit. So I'm gonna have to put that on my list.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for your time. You are just a powerhouse, so positive, always engaging. I love checking in to see what you're up to. Congratulations on all the success you guys have had. Look forward to seeing you, if not sooner, hopefully sooner, but look forward to seeing you guys in September for sure. And if folks want to learn more, get involved, get a hold of you, become a member, obviously nicca.us. Where else would you like them to follow you and keep up to date with you guys on?
You can follow us on Instagram. We're building up our LinkedIn, so you can find us there too. And we're always available by email. You can contact us through our website, and we'll get back to you by email if that's better for you. So we're on Facebook also, but you know, all the places for
All
the
the
most
things.
part. But Andy, I really thank you for this platform and this opportunity to chat with you. I love sharing our story, and I'm really happy and grateful to be able to have shared it with you. So, and your audience. So I
Well,
thank
you
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 very
told us
much.
the word for hello. You got to tell us the word for goodbye.
That I don't know. Now I'm
Ah,
struck.
oh no.
I'll find it out and I'll drop it in the comments.
Oh no. I thought that was an
I
easy
know.
one.
I didn't get a prep.
We might have to edit that out. Emily.
That's okay because I am also a big learner, a big advocate of always learning. And so I don't know goodbye, so I will learn it now. But I
Because it's
can tell
never
you it,
goodbye, Jen. That's why it's never goodbye, right?
right? So I can tell you in Native Hawaiian, it is aloha.
There we go. Good recovery. Well, well, thank you again, Jen. I really appreciate it. And of course, thanks to all of you for hanging out, listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it insightful. Kind of a rare look behind the scenes here of all the wonderful things that our friends and colleagues at our tribal programs are doing, serving their communities, honoring the heritage, and really driving the ball forward. So thank you so much. This is Andy saying,
Thank you.
I'll see you on the next one.